च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you again. My pranams to Revered Swami. My goodness. Swatma Ramana, too many Swami. That's embarrassing. Not a good start. Swatma Ramanaji Maharaj. I want to say Manju Maharaj. Anyway. And Chandika Nanaji Maharaj. And my namaskars to all of you. So, I'll be speaking today. We're, of course, celebrating Krishna Ashtami. And so for that occasion, I thought I would speak on something just... My iPad died. Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. Oh boy. What is this? I have no idea why. My iPad is just turned off. Oh boy, okay. It has to restart. Anyway, I'll start without the iPad and then we'll let it go on. So, I'll be speaking on Sri Krishna and Sri Ramakrishna. And in the brief time I have, I want to talk about just some of the ways in which there are profound similarities between Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Krishna. That he not only had extraordinary love for Sri Krishna, but that in a deep sense, he was identified with Sri Krishna in many ways. So we can start with his upbringing. He was raised in a Vaishnava household. His parents were Vaishnavas, and he grew up in Bengal, which was dominated by two spiritual currents primarily. One was Vaishnava and the other was Tantric. And he was strongly influenced by both of them. And we find that in the course of his sadhana, his first guru, Bhairavi Brahmani, she was a Vaishnava Tantric or a Tantric Vaishnava. It's a little bit, she was a mixture of both these currents, spiritual currents, and he practiced many different Vaishnava sadhanas. And in fact, he practiced one of the most difficult, but also one of the highest sadhanas in the Vaishnava tradition, namely Madhura Bhava, which is the practice of being the lover of Sri Krishna. And that requires identifying with the gopis, with the gopi in the love play with Sri Krishna, which is extremely difficult. Anybody who has even the slightest impurity in their mind will not be able to practice this properly. But Sri Ramakrishna practiced it, and practiced it to an extraordinary extent, to such an extent that he actually started developing physical features of a woman. Is that amazing? This is almost unprecedented in the history of spiritual practice, even in the Vaishnava traditions, extremely unusual. It's like, for instance, Saint Francis of Assisi. He had these stigmata of where Christ was nailed to the cross. Saint Francis actually had wounds there in the areas where Christ was nailed to the cross. So it's kind of like that Sri Ramakrishna was actually manifesting physical symptoms of being the female lover of Krishna. And, so now, sorry, now my iPad is restarted. Okay, my goodness. Now. So, what happened was, during this sadhana, Madhura Bhava sadhana, he realized that without the grace of Sri Radha, he would never realize Krishna. And so he started meditating deeply on Radha and praying to Radha to such an extent that he identified with her, and he had a vision of Radha merging into his own body. And then he had the vision of Krishna, but not only that, he began to identify as Radha, and he started behaving and living as Sri Radha. So it's quite extraordinary, because Radha is considered to be Krishna Shakti. And even in the Vaishnava tradition, nobody dares to emulate Radha. They can emulate the other gopis, even that's a very high state. But Radha is the queen of all the gopis. But that was Sri Ramakrishna's love for Sri Krishna. He also went on a few pilgrimages. One of those was to Vrindavan. And I wanted to read to you a little account from Swami Sharadanandaji's biography about his pilgrimage to Vrindavan. The master went to Vrindavan with Mothur Babu. He, it is said, was in a wonderful bhava samadhi to see the image of Banki Bihari. That's a famous temple of Krishna in Vrindavan. He lost himself and ran to embrace him. When he saw cowherd boys returning from pastures and crossing the Yamuna with herds of cattle at sunset, he became filled with spiritual emotion. Inasmuch as, among them, he had the vision of the cowherd Krishna, dark blue like a newly formed cloud, and bedecked with the feathers of a peacock's tail on his head. The master visited Nidhuban, Govardhan, and a few other places of Vraja. And then Sharadanji adds a very interesting detail. Sri Ramakrishna liked these places more than Vrindavan, Nidhuban and Govardhan. Having various visions of Sri Krishna and Sri Radha, he felt intense divine love in those places. And it goes on, the account goes on. During his pilgrimage to Vrindavan, he met a wonderful female saint named Ganga Mata. And she was so intoxicated with the love of Krishna that Sri Ramakrishna was very impressed and enjoyed spending time with her. She was an elderly lady. And he was strongly considering just staying there and living in a hut with Ganga Mata, engaging in spiritual practices. But finally, he remembered his poor mother sitting in Dakshineshwar. And so it was his love for his mother that brought him back to Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna, toward the end of his life, after he got throat cancer, he told the devotees that would visit him that he wanted to attend the Panihati festival. It's a Vaishnava festival. And he went, even though they were concerned that because of the throat cancer that he shouldn't risk going into ecstasy and this and that. But he insisted and they agreed. So they took him to the Panihati festival. And the moment he saw them singing Vaishnava songs about loving Krishna, he went into ecstasy and started dancing with everybody there. And finally, his identity merged with Chaitanya's to such an extent that the people there looked upon him as Sri Chaitanya himself. It's extraordinary. So it's very interesting because Sri Ramakrishna sometimes would say that he was an incarnation of Sri Krishna. He who was Rama and he who was Krishna is now Ramakrishna in this body. Sometimes he would hint that he was also an incarnation of Chaitanya. When some people told him that, I think you're an incarnation of Chaitanya, he indirectly agreed. And then, of course, none other than Holy Mother Sharada Devi and Swami Vivekananda looked upon Sri Ramakrishna as an incarnation of Kali, Mother Kali. So he was, in a sense, an incarnation of all of these different forms of the divine. That's the extraordinary thing about Sri Ramakrishna. The moment Sri Ramakrishna left his body, Holy Mother cried, "Kali, Kali, why have you left me?" Those were her words of emotion. And Swami Vivekananda used to say that Kali, Mother Kali, worked up Sri Ramakrishna's body to serve her own ends, to carry out her own aims. So the Vaishnava currents in Sri Ramakrishna's life, his sadhana, his realizations, his love, they're so strong that some scholars have argued that Sri Ramakrishna was basically a Vaishnava. There's one scholar named Narasingha Sil. He wrote an article arguing that Sri Ramakrishna was a Vaishnava. But the beauty of Sri Ramakrishna, this is mentioned in the Gospel. Sri Ramakrishna said, everybody who comes to see me, they think that I belong to their sect, and their sect alone. When the Shaktas come, the Shaktas think I'm a Shakta. When the Advaita Vedantins come, the Advaita Vedantins think I'm an Advaita Vedantin. When the Vaishnavas come, they think I'm a Vaishnava. When a Christian came, a Quaker Christian named Mishra, when he came to visit Sri Ramakrishna, he saw Sri Ramakrishna as Christ. It's simply extraordinary that everybody looked upon him as their own. And he was their own. But because he was everything, he was Ananta Bhavamayi. That's a term used to mean that he was a person, a saint, an avatara of infinite spiritual attitudes and moods, bhavas. He loved Krishna so much, there are quite a few incidents that I can mention. So one of them is, he's walking in Kolkata, and he just sees a British boy, a young British boy, leaning against a tree like this, with his body bent. The moment he saw the boy, he went into samadhi, and he lost external consciousness. Why? Because that boy leaning against a tree reminded him of Krishna, bent in the same way. Amazing. And of course, anybody who's read the Gospel will know that on almost every page are Vaishnava songs, that Sri Ramakrishna himself is singing many Vaishnava songs. When he's not singing them, he's asking others to sing Vaishnava songs, and he's regularly going into ecstasy and samadhi from singing and listening to these beautiful songs. I'll give you a few examples. So this is taken from the Gospel. He says to the visitors, you must cultivate intense zeal for God. You must feel love for him and be attracted to him. The gopis of Vrindavan felt the attraction of Krishna. Let me sing you a song. And this is the song, the lyrics to the song. Of course, it's in Bangla, and so it's not quite the same, but I'm reading you the translation. Listen, the flute has sounded in yonder wood. There I must fly, for Krishna waits on the path. Tell me, friends, will you come along or no? To you, my Krishna is merely an empty name. To me, he is the anguish of my heart. You hear his flute notes only with your ears, but oh, I hear them in my deepest soul. I hear Krishna's flute calling, Radha, come out. Without you, the grove is shorn of its loveliness. And then, it's written in the Gospel, the master sang the song with tears in his eyes and said to Keshav and the other Brahmo devotees, whether you accept Radha and Krishna or not, please do accept their attraction for each other. The tan, in Bangla the word is tan. Try to create that same yearning in your heart for God. Yearning, vyakulata, is all you need in order to realize him. So this shows Sri Ramakrishna's broadness. He accepted this love play between the gopis and Sri Krishna. He accepted it, he practiced it. He practiced Madhura Bhava and realized God through that path. But he also knew it was a very difficult path and that it's liable to misunderstanding. For anybody who has the slightest trace of lust, they'll misunderstand the whole thing. There's a spiritual logic to this love play between Krishna and the gopis that cannot be understood to an impure mind. And he understood that as well. And of course, he also understood that rationally oriented minds, Western educated people, may find it very hard to believe that this thing actually happened, that this love play happened, what exactly it means. He understood it. But what he said was, even if you don't accept it literally as a historical reality, there's still something great to learn from it. He's telling Brahmo Samaj followers. Brahmo Samaj people didn't even believe in Krishna as an avatara. They didn't believe in any incarnations of God. They didn't believe in any forms of God, let alone the love play between gopis and Krishna. But what he said was, you can still learn from the Vaishnava tradition. What can you learn? They're still bhaktas. Brahma Samaj followers are still bhaktas. They believe in the personal God. They believe in devotion, bhakti. So what can we learn from these gopis? Their extraordinary love for Krishna. That longing that the gopis had for Krishna, we should try to cultivate in our own lives. Every Brahmo should also learn from that. That's what Sri Ramakrishna said. You don't have to accept the literal truth of this play, divine play between the gopis and Sri Krishna, but you should at least take that longing, that inner longing for God. Sri Ramakrishna says in another place, how intense was the love of the gopis for Sri Krishna. And then he speaks to Captain. He called him Captain, this particular devotee. Please tell us something about the gopis. You read the Bhagavata so much. And then Captain says, when Sri Krishna lived in Vrindavan without any of his royal splendor, even then the gopis loved him more than their own souls. Therefore Sri Krishna said, how shall I be able to pay off my debt to the gopis who surrendered to me their all, their bodies, minds, and souls? Captain's words awakened intense love for Krishna in the master's mind. He exclaimed, Govinda, 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 and was about to go into an ecstatic mood. Captain was amazed and said, how blessed he is, how blessed he is. Captain and the devotees watched this love ecstasy of Sri Ramakrishna. They sat quietly gazing at him, awaiting his return to the consciousness of the world. Another beautiful incident, which many of you probably are not aware of, I'm guessing, because it's not found in the Gospel, it's not found in Lila Prashango, it's not even found in Charan's biography, so I'm giving you a deep cut. It's from Sri Mahadarshan. It's a multi-volume journal of conversations with M, not conversations with Sri Ramakrishna, but conversations with M much later, after Sri Ramakrishna left his body. It's a beautiful compilation, and it's been translated into English, I think as M and his Gospel or something like that. There, M mentions this incident. He said that one day, M was speaking to Sri Ramakrishna and mentioned that he was going to go to Puri to have darshan of Jagannath. There's the famous Jagannath temple in Puri. And so Sri Ramakrishna, the moment he heard that, became very excited. You might wonder, if Sri Ramakrishna loved Krishna so much, why didn't he visit Jagannath temple in Puri? One of the holiest places for Vaishnavas, where Chaitanya himself went regularly and then went into samadhi and realized God. Sri Ramakrishna gave the answer. He said, I cannot go, because if I go, I'll leave my body. Because he was so closely identified with Jagannath, who is Krishna. Jagannath is Krishna. Chaitanya is the one who rediscovered Jagannath as Krishna. So he loved Krishna so much and felt so identified with Sri Krishna that he couldn't go to Puri Jagannath. So that's the background. So now, when he heard that M was going to have darshan of Jagannath, he became very excited. And he said, okay, that's wonderful. So please, when you go, enter the inner sanctum and hug Jagannath for me. How many of you have heard of this incident? Very few. Good. I'm glad that I get to share. One person in the back, I think, has heard the story. So let me tell it to you. It's a very interesting, very touching incident. So Ramakrishna says, you go to the inner sanctum and you get up there and you embrace Jagannath for me and then come back. And then I'll hug you, and by the transitive property, I will have hugged Sri Jagannath, right? So M goes to Puri, goes to the Jagannath temple, gets into the inner sanctum. Now he's in a bit of a bind because it's full of people, including priests there that work in the temple. Now, he's not allowed to touch the deity. This is a rule. Any of you who go to Hindu temples will know that. You can't just jump up and hug the deities. So now he comes up with an idea. He had some coins in his pocket. So he takes those coins, tosses them on the floor. He knew that the priests would jump after the coins. So the priests jumped after the coins. At that moment, he came up and embraced Jagannath. He was a very smart guy, this M. And then he came down again, and then the priest didn't notice actually. He left the inner sanctum, came back to Dakshineshwar, reported the whole thing to Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was very pleased. And then he said, now let me hug you. And he hugged M, and then he had this beautiful, as I said, by the transitive property, he hugged Sri Jagannath. Because if he had gone himself, he would have left the body. That's how much he loved Krishna and identified with Sri Krishna. So I'm glad I got to share that with you. Now, I wanted to also reflect on one of Sri Ramakrishna's most significant statements made at the very end of his life. Naran, as we all know, the future Swami Vivekananda, he was the greatest of all of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples. But I would argue that one of the reasons why Sri Ramakrishna loved him the most is that he was the most critical, is that he questioned more than anyone else. He was always questioning. He wouldn't accept anything just on faith. When Sri Ramakrishna was talking about having visions of Mother Kali, not undoubted. He said, why should we believe you? They could be hallucinations. And Sri Ramakrishna, instead of scolding him, he appreciated it. So in the same way, when so many other people, so many other visitors, devotees, had already declared that Sri Ramakrishna was God, an avatara, Naran would not accept it. He would not accept it until the very end. And Sri Ramakrishna, just weeks before he left his body, he's sitting there with throat cancer, lying there. He can barely move. And Naran, it just crossed Naran's mind at that time, just sitting next to Sri Ramakrishna by his bedside. He thought to himself, if Sri Ramakrishna now in this state declares to me that he is an incarnation, then alone I will believe him. And at that very moment, Sri Ramakrishna just read his mind, and he said, he who was Rama and Krishna is now Ramakrishna in this body, but not in your Vedantic sense. But not in your Vedantic sense. It's a very, very important statement. It's a kind of Maha Mantra in our tradition. What did Sri Ramakrishna mean? Not in your Vedantic sense. Now, when Sri Ramakrishna used the word Vedanta, he meant usually Advaita Vedanta, a particular school of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, because it was a common practice. Even now, many people, when they say Vedanta, what they really mean is Advaita Vedanta, even though it's not technically correct. Vedanta is broader than Advaita Vedanta. It includes bhakti schools of Vedanta like Ramanujas, Madhvas, Chaitanyas, and so on. But I think what Sri Ramakrishna meant is, he's telling Naran, I am that same Rama and that same Krishna, but now incarnated in this body as Sri Ramakrishna, not in the sense of Advaita Vedanta. Now, how does Advaita Vedanta understand incarnations? That's the next thing we have to ask. So I think Advaita Vedantans will explain it in two ways. Number one, they'll say, look, you always have to keep in mind these two levels of reality. There's the absolute truth, the absolute reality, which is called Paramatika Satta, and then there's empirical reality, which is Vyavaharika. And so one way that Advaita Vedantans can explain the incarnation is, yes, we accept incarnations at the Vyavaharika level. And what is that Vyavaharika level? The standpoint of ignorance. So long as I mistakenly think I'm this body-mind complex, so long as I mistakenly think I'm an individual soul, then we can accept this provisional reality of this whole world of names and forms, and we can accept that God is incarnated in the form of a human body, like Sri Ramakrishna. But Sri Ramakrishna is saying it's not in that sense. I'm not just an empirical reality. I am ultimately real. Not in your Advaita Vedantic sense, but there's a second sense in which we might be able to think about this Vedantic sense. You find it in the Gospel. Sometimes Naran is arguing with Girish Ghosh, because Girish Ghosh is one of the most ardent devotees of Sri Ramakrishna and strongly believes that Sri Ramakrishna was an incarnation, along with Ramchandra Datta and a number of other devotees. So they're having a debate with each other, Naran and Girish, and they're really going at it. They're both brilliant, young, feisty minds, and they're arguing with each other about whether it's even possible for God to incarnate as a human being. And Sri Ramakrishna they're mixing, I think, English with Bangla, and then Sri Ramakrishna intervenes. And, before I mention that, Naran, what was Naran's argument? Naran's argument is, yes, fine. I believe in incarnations only to the extent that every one of us is an incarnation of Brahman, because everybody's Brahman. Brahman is within all of us. That's the true nature of every single one of us. Which means we're all incarnations. I'll accept incarnations if you admit that we're all incarnations, but I will not accept that there are unique human beings who are incarnations, whereas we are not. This is one of his arguments, because everything is Brahman. If everything is Brahman, then everybody's an incarnation. Sri Ramakrishna says, not in that sense either. So it is not that I am Rama and Krishna just in the Vyavaharika sense. It's also not in the sense that because everybody is Brahman, I'm also Brahman. No. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that even though Brahman is present in everyone, that Brahman manifests to varying degrees in different people. Right? That's why when he met Vidyasagar, the great Pandit Vidyasagar, who was also famous for his compassion, for his charity, Vidyasagar asked him this question, do you mean to say that Shakti is manifest to varying degrees in different people? And Sri Ramakrishna laughed and says, of course. Why is it that so many people respect you and love you? Is it because you've grown two horns? No, it's because he manifests Shakti, the divine, to a greater degree than most people. And the way that Sri Ramakrishna defined the avatara, the divine incarnation, is the person in whom the divine is manifest to a maximal degree. It's the maximum manifestation of the divine, of Shakti. And of course, not everybody is manifesting the divine to the maximal degree, right? So it was only when Sri Ramakrishna, at the very end of his life in that body, when he declared, he who was Rama and Krishna is now Ramakrishna, but not in your Vedantic sense, only then did Naran accept Sri Ramakrishna as God. And he went so far as to say, now this is found in the complete works, but in a bit of a misleading way, because there's a rule book dictated by Swami Vivekananda himself, originally in Bengali, which is privately circulated. It's only the monks have it. And it's not, the whole thing was not published, but a small part of it is published in the complete work. So I'm reading from that. And one of the things he says there, what Swamiji himself, word for word, this is what Swamiji says, God, that same God who incarnated as Krishna to deliver the great teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, that same God has now incarnated in the form of Sri Ramakrishna to harmonize all of the different conflicting spiritual philosophies, all the different religious paths throughout the world. Because in the course of time, even after Sri Ramakrishna's time, all these religious conflicts and tensions and fanaticism, all that has gotten much worse. It's gone onto a global scale. And so God had to incarnate again, this time as Sri Ramakrishna, to finish the job, in a certain sense. So this is a perfect segue, actually, or a kind of an advertisement for tomorrow's talk, because I'll be giving my last talk here in Durban tomorrow before I go back to Hollywood. And the topic is Bhagavad Gita in the light of Sri Ramakrishna. So I'll be going into some of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, how we can reinterpret it in the light of the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. But Swamiji understood that one of the things that's so important and so great and so unique about the Ramakrishna incarnation is that he was the Samanvaya Avatara. He was the Avatara who harmonized all of the different conflicting spiritual paths, all of the different world religions. Because Bhagavan Krishna, of course, was harmonizing the spiritual paths in India at the time within Hinduism. He wasn't talking about non-Hindu religions. But Sri Ramakrishna, he was living in British colonial India, and he met Muslims, and he met Christians, and he met Buddhists and so on and so forth, Sikhs. So he had to harmonize not just the different conflicting traditions within Hinduism, but all of the different world religions. So he was kind of completing the task that Bhagavan Krishna had started in the Bhagavad Gita. So I think I'll end there and encourage you to please attend the talk tomorrow. We have to run to Chatsworth now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.